Yo, what is up, guys? Cool 412 the Fox here. Happy Halloween, everybody. Now, anyways, I want to welcome you all to another exciting edition of a Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. Now, I gotta admit, after reviewing Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, I had no idea what to expect. But the problem was, the story was a little different, and since Michael wasn't in it, it was kinda heartbroken enough, but anyways, we are on to our next review of the series, as now we review A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, or Dream Warriors for short. Now, Dream Warriors is one of my all-time favorite Nightmare on Elm Street films, and I never thought I'd get a chance to review this one, because it's actually really cool. And yet Freddy has his trademark glove once again. And it makes me happy enough, at least, that the final girl of the film, Nancy, returns to the film to have her showdown with Freddy once again. Now let us review A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. The movie begins with a classic title card, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, giving that little magic. Now, at the opening of the film, we see someone making arts and crafts of the actual house from the original Nightmare on Elm Street films, from first to second. Now, in the third film, this is where we are introduced to the newest final girl of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Kristen. Kristen is up at 1 a.m. trying to do a little arts and crafts, it looks like, trying to stay up and not have any bad dreams. But that is until she started turning up the radio so loud and trying to stay up, making what looks like to be the Springwood house, or more likely the same house that Freddy Krueger haunts to this day. But throughout the film, that is where we are introduced to Kristen's mother, who walked in unhappy that her daughter was awake. Sorry for my mix-up, folks. I'm a little stunned about the opening. Anyways, that's where, in the film, she's not happy with her daughter being up at past 1 a.m. and she wanted to wait for her to come home, and she's already there, so the only thing she kept saying was in the film, on delay, on delay. I'm like, what is this? Stunned out of my mind, a mother who's already, like, disrespectful to her own daughter, but it's already harsh enough. But anyways, she tucks her into bed, and that was where she had a guest over asking on where she keeps the bourbon. She was like, I'll be right down, I have a guest. And she said, I have a guest over. And she was like, oh, so I guess you don't want to keep him waiting. She's like, no, I can't. So by the time Kristen fell asleep in the film, that's where we see kids playing jump rope and singing Freddy's classic song. And then we see a little girl on a tricycle. Then they started having their talk. She was like, hello, what's your name? And she said, Kristen, who are you? She was laughing. Then that was where we heard Freddy's signature glove playing more mental mind games as always. And that was where the little girl on the tricycle drove all the way into the house. Kristen chased after her, but that was where they explained everything. And then when the furnace was on fire, that's where she said, Freddy's home. And that led to where it got bad to worse. And the chase was on. As she picked up the little girl to try to get her to safety, Freddy was chasing her down the halls. In shades of the first film, she got her feet stuck to the floor, and Freddy was far behind her. But when she got there, boy, it was not a pretty sight. And that's where the little girl said, put me down, you're hurting me. But when she looked down, it was just nothing more but a skeleton. And she woke up from her nightmare. She went to the bathroom to try to freshen up, but that was where Freddy struck again, playing more mental mind games with Kristen until when her mother walked in. I don't want to talk about it due to strict ordeals these days, but yet, rules are rules. What can you do? And eventually, Kristen passed out. But anyways, we then cut to Weston Hills, where Kristen and all the other cast of characters were there. I was immediately stunned on where this film was taking place at Weston Hills. I mean, I myself am very stunned to see a different story to be told at a different location for the first time. But yet, it's Freddy Krueger. What do you expect? But in the end, I'm utterly stunned, but yet, that's where we are introduced to a whole cast of characters. And yet, as it points out to another part of the film where that was where Kristen was being treated by Dr. Gordon, but no, not the Dr. Gordon from Saw. A different Dr. Gordon from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. But anyways, as he got called in, they were trying to calm down Kristen, but that was until she sang the rhyme. And that's where Nancy, played once again by the legendary Heather Leningcap. Heather Leningcap, I think, has pulled off Nancy for the past few years from the first film and the third, and I believe is still one of the best actresses of all time in the history of filmmaking. But yet, her and Robert Englund shared an amazing friendship behind the scenes, and yet they are both legends and I believe should be in the Horror Film Hall of Fame someday. But anyways, moving on. Into the film, Nancy walked in asking Kristen on where she learned that rhyme. Kristen hugged her, and that was where Dr. Gordon and Nancy were getting a chance to meet each other. And then that is where, later on in the film, we are introduced to the whole cast of other characters involved in the film. And a young man named Kincaid, who was always put in the quiet room at times, when it came down to his strict temper. And all the other characters, I was stunned, and yet, throughout the entire ordeal of the film, that is where we're introduced to another doctor of the film. To me, it was kind of amazing. I didn't know what to expect. But in the end, that's where the story kicks off and they're claiming, like, why their dreams have committed them there and what's going on with the situation. And she claims that your dreams are probably either emitting of guilt or something else. And all the stress you've been through. Then anyways, we then cut to where Nancy and Dr. Gordon, after the introductions of the characters, it was where Kristen was asleep that night, trying to do another drawing of the house it looked like, but then we get a glimpse of the tricycle being rolled in, and luckily it's not the reference or a meme. But I don't want to get into it due to copyright these days, but anyways, rules are rules. But anyways, as the tricycle rolled in, luckily it's not Billy the Puppet, aka Jigsaw, rolling in. That was where Kristen is brought back to the house. And in the same house she was modeling at the time. But the more it boiled down to the situation, that is where Kristen tried to escape the house, but that was where the more she kept exploring, Freddy kept playing his mind games with her. And then Freddy popped out of nowhere, trying to destroy Kristen, trying to take her out with his dream powers, but that was where Kristen screamed out for Nancy. And when she heard Kristen's voice, she fell asleep and then was in the same dream as Kristen. And Nancy saved her, but that is until Kristen and Nancy backed up. When Freddy got the glimpse, looking at Nancy, that's where he said, "You." And then she said, "Oh my God, run!" And that was where they got out of the dream. But when Nancy looked, she realized, oh my, I can't believe I'm back at it again. And then after that, that is where we are now in the other part of the film where they're playing what looks like to be a version of Dungeons and Dragons. And yet, in this version though, that's where I hear, "In the name of Lorix, Prince of Elves, demon be gone." And except this is a different version of the board game, and yet it looked like fun. But yet Dungeons and Dragons, on the other hand, that's another story and another review for another time, for another video someday. And if you guys want me to do a review on Stranger Things from Season 1 and all the other seasons, please let me know. I'll be more than glad to make that happen. But anyways, that's where it was lights out, everyone was going to sleep, but one of the other patients were on lookout at the time. But one of the other rooms is where we get a glimpse of what looked like to be a stretch of puppets. But one of them, however, starts to turn into Freddy Krueger, making his dramatic entrance with his mortal mental mind games like he knows how. But as soon as Freddy got out of the puppet form, he was in his regular form. And that was where Freddy began playing his mind games. When one of the kids woke up and saw him, he was like, "Shh." But I don't want to go into what happened. And that was when, let's just say, he began moving one of the other kids around like a puppet. And it ain't no master of puppets. But anyways, in a glimpse of Kincaid, he thought he was just sleepwalking. But no, it was Freddy moving him around the hospital. But that was when one of the kids saw him and he woke up the other. He was realizing one of the patients were like, "What's going on? Like, what are you doing?" And that was where he realized that on what he was doing, he wanted to get help. And that was where it led to bad to worse. And one of the other kids I forgot to mention was, his name was Joey. And by the time Joey he was unable to talk throughout the film, but I was kind of stunned about this kid. He, I think, reminded me of a character from Metallica Through the Never, but yet a good film. Anyways, that's where it led to bad to worse, where he kept waking up all the other kids, letting them know what's going on. And they ran to the same room trying to stop him. But Freddy, let's just say, already took him out and cut the strings. And it was the end of Freddy Krueger's puppet show. And like I said, it ain't no master of puppets. And that was where, in the film, during the group session, it did not go too well, and that led to where they were arguing with each other. And the other doctor in the film did not take it lightly. And that's where she realized she was not going to listen to any more of it. And then she asked him, "How long are you going to keep blaming your dreams for your own sicknesses?" And that was where she thought it'd be a good idea to start everyone to lock their doors during sleeping hours. And she thought it was a good idea to start an evening sedation for everyone at the time, but that led to bad to worse when Kincaid snapped and she pushed a button, and that's when I believe she called in the staff, and he bought himself a night in the quiet room. But I think he did not take it lightly, and Kincaid was so upset, and they brought him right to the quiet room, and everyone had to stay in their seats. But it led to bad to worse throughout the film. We get a glimpse of Kincaid in the quiet room and one of the other characters who was going to become a TV star, or in this case, a movie star. Then She was watching TV, trying to stay up, and we get a glimpse of a talk show. But when she looked at it, it led to bad to worse when she fell asleep and saw the TV still running. And that was where Freddy popped up again. And to my amazement, I was kind of stunned to see Freddy as a host on a talk show. I mean, who knows what could happen? That would be pretty cool if he had his own talk show. Or then again, maybe not. But anyways, the TV went static, but by the time she walked over to the TV to see what was going on, and by the time she hit it, Freddy grabbed her. And that was where Freddy, in the end, took her out. But throughout the film, it was amazing enough knowing Freddy, on the other hand, is still pulling off some movie quotes I thought I would never see again, but I immediately loved it right there. And A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors is still a classic, but never goes out of style. But anyways, that's where everyone had their group session, and they talked about what was going on. And Nancy explained to everyone that they're the last of the Elm Street kids, and explaining what happened to Freddy, knowing that their parents took him out. But by the time they were starting their therapy session, that was where Dr. Gordon had an idea to do a little hypnosis. But throughout the film, before we get to that, let's just say that at the cemetery, Dr. Gordon meets a nun who is seen throughout the film, and yet I was kind of stunned about it because she was talking about Freddy throughout the cemetery scene. And when Nancy showed up, she was gone. It was like, now you see her, now you don't. But whatever the reason, must be something that no one can see and only he can see. But anyways, in the therapy scene, that's where it led to where the scene began. And everyone was in the dream world, but didn't know. And we get a glimpse of Joey leaving the room, but I don't want to talk about what happened here in this scene. Because, yeah, rules are rules. Anyways, in the other room, everyone thought they were still awake, but however, when Dr. Gordon moved the marble, it was shown they were in the dream world. Everyone showed their talent in their dreams. Kincaid with super strength, Kristen with an amazing gymnastic skills, and the other kid who is known as the Wizard Master, and he's able to walk. Then we get a glimpse of the other kid where she says in her dreams she's beautiful and bad. Then that's when we cut to Joey, and yeah, like I said, rules are rules, and I don't want to get into trouble, but anyways, that's where Freddy was playing his monumental mind games and caught Joey. And that was where it looked like a fiery pit. But however, everyone in the therapy room were trapped until the other doctor walked in and was wondering what was going on. And Joey was in a coma. And she was saying, "Code blue, code blue." But the head of the Weston Hills Hospital did not take it lightly. And he fired both Dr. Gordon and Nancy. And she was now in charge of the hospital. But that was where, all of a sudden, as Dr. Gordon was outside grabbing his things, putting them in the car, he sees the nun again. That's when he screamed out, "Sister!" When he went up, he found her lighting candles, and she talked about Freddy's origin and about his mother. And that was where the other part of the story, I was very, very shocked about. I just really didn't know how far it was going to go. But yet, the only thing she said was the only way to take out Freddy was to lay his spirit to rest by solid ground. And that was where Nancy and Dr. Gordon went out to find her father. But Kristen was at the hospital and she had a major panic attack. And she did not take it lightly with Gordon gone, along with Nancy. And they put her in the quiet room and they sedated her. And that's where the doctor said, "Alright, everybody, back to bed." And deep down in my mind, I did not like this character one bit. I mean, sure, she may be doing her job as a doctor, trying to make sure all the patients are safe in the hospital. But the thing is, it just ain't right what she's been doing. But however, she needs to understand the whole ordeal to make sure everyone is safe. But however, I just didn't like the character a lot that time. But anyways, that's when we cut to the glimpse of Nancy's father, who is still a police officer, in the bar. But however, she wanted him to tell her where Freddy's bones are. But that was where it led to bad to worse, but he didn't give out the information. So there was a phone call from the hospital and the others were telling Nancy and Dr. Gordon what's going on. So that was where immediately they got up. Nancy went to the hospital and Dr. Gordon basically stayed with Nancy's father, and they went for a little ride and a scavenger hunt, that as he put it. But by the time Nancy got to the hospital, one of the staff did not let her through to see Kristen, who was in the quiet room. But however, that was where he gave her a chance to see the others. And they realized it was their last therapy session together. But that's when we caught a glimpse of Dr. Gordon and Nancy's father at a church. And from the looks of it, he was trying to get holy water and a crucifix. But one of the priests stopped him and was realizing, what is he doing? So he pointed out that he needed the crucifix and the holy water. And he gave him his driver's license and said, "I'll be back." So after they left, that was when Nancy began hypnotizing everyone, and they were in the quiet room with Kristen. But when it came down to the whole ordeal with Freddy, he was still playing his small mental mind games as he started clawing up the entire quiet room with his glove, sending a message, "Welcome to my world." And then that's where Kristen was back at home. I was like, really? Is this the end of the film? And it was like the same ordeal, but this time she hugged her mother, realized that she was home. But then it was the same ordeal again. And then this time Freddy popped up and was just like, "I said, where's the bourbon?" And that's when he said to Kristen, "You should listen to your mother." And that led to where it was Freddy playing more mental mind games with Kristen, and the chase was on, using her gymnastic skills. And that was where she escaped Freddy. And she was calling out for Nancy. And that's when we cut to Tara. In this case, Taryn. The other kid that was pointing out that in her dreams, she's beautiful and bad. But that led to where she heard Kristen's voice. But by the time they split up, we get a glimpse of her dream. And she was in an alleyway, it looked like. And we see a heart shape that said, Freddy X Tara. Or in this case, Taryn. But she pulled out her dueling knives and ready to fight. As she walked through the alley, that was where Freddy popped up and was like, "Welcome home, Taryn. Look familiar." Then the fight broke out between the two. That was where... Yeah, I don't want to talk about this scene due to how things are these days, but yet, rules are rules. Anyways. In the scene, that's where Freddy takes out Tara. And she was done. And then we cut to the Wizard Master. And that was where it was revealed that the wheelchair was spiked up and dangerous. And that's where Freddy said, "Well, you look tired. Have a seat." He was like, "No thanks. I'm fine where I'm at." He was like, "For now, maybe. But when you wake up, it's back in the saddle again." And that was where the wheelchair tried to take out the young man, but however, it got him in his leg a little bit. And that was where Freddy said, "It's the chair for you, kid." And that's where he kept repeating himself that he was the Wizard Master. And as he said it for the second time, he transformed into the Wizard Master and destroyed the wheelchair. And Freddy was stunned. And as he referenced, "In the name of Lorax, Prince of Elves, demon be gone." But as he hit Freddy, it did not go too well, because Freddy pulled him back. And as he got him, the only thing he said to him was, "Sorry, kid. I don't believe in fairy tales." And then Freddy took him out. Then we cut back to Kristen, who reunites with Nancy, but behind the wall, Kincaid popped up, showed off his strength. And by the time Kincaid kept messing with Freddy, trying to call him out, and that was where it led to bad to worse. The door opened, and he realized it didn't go anywhere, but it did, right to Freddy's lair. As they walked down the stairs, then we cut to a junkyard, and that was where Nancy's father pointed out to Dr. Gordon that the bones are in the Cadillac. By the time he opened it, he was trying to leave, but that was where he told him was, "You're going to attend a funeral that's long overdue." Well, in the dream world, they made it right to Freddy's lair that looks more like the boiler room. And that was where Freddy popped up again. And the only thing he was doing was playing more mental mind games with the others. With his glove, and had a teddy bear in his hand. And that's where he played his little games. He was just like, "Joey, look, all the little piggies come home." Well, when Nancy demanded Freddy to let him go, that was where Freddy said, "Your wish is my command." And by the time he used his magic, it led to bad to worse. And by the time Nancy got to Joey, he was hanging on to him, trying to make sure he didn't fall into the fiery pit. By the time Freddy was behind them, Kristen with a somersault knocking down Freddy. And by the time Freddy was out on his feet, he nipped up. And Kincaid helped the others. As the fight broke out, Freddy grabbed Kincaid by... He was lifting him up, showed off his power. But then, when they tried to take him out, Freddy was still alive. And he got so strong. And that was where Freddy realized that the souls give him strength. And they realized with all the souls he's collected, it gives him more strength and power. And that's where Freddy said, "There's always room for more." What? But that was where, at first, Freddy was stunned to hear that Dr. Gordon and Nancy's father were about to make sure that Freddy was laid to rest, but he didn't let that happen. After he let go of Kincaid, he left the dream world to take care of what was going on outside of it. They realized, what's that noise? He was like, I don't hear anything. He says, I do. Then they hear all the cars going off, and Nancy's father said, bury the frickin' thing! And that was where Freddy showed up, using his powers to try to make sure that he wasn't laid to rest. But when Nancy's father realized the situation, he finally snapped back into it and the fight was on. But then Freddy took out Nancy's father. But when Dr. Gordon tried to fight back with a shovel, it did not go too well. Dr. Gordon was knocked out. Freddy tried to finish the job, and he thinks he finally won. But Dr. Gordon was knocked out. Then we cut back to the dream world where they were in a room of mirrors, doors closed behind them, and Freddy popped up and he said was, sorry to keep you waiting, but I'm sure there would be more of me to come around. And it shows a glimpse of all the mirrors showing Freddy's face, trying to scare everyone and play his small mental mind games like he knows how. As if it was the end for everybody, that was where Joey showed off his dream power as he screamed, broke all the mirrors, and everyone thought Freddy was defeated. Nancy's father came down, explaining that Freddy took him out and he moved on. But as they hugged it out, it was revealed that Freddy had Nancy, and he finally got her after what happened from the first film. But as Freddy was about to finish everyone up and take them out, that was where Nancy fought back with everything, and Dr. Gordon woke up. And he was ready to lay Freddy to rest. And that's when he said was, please God, help the children and Nancy. And he was praying to God with the holy water, and said was, ashes to ashes. Then we get a glimpse of Freddy being destroyed as he's about to be laid to rest by the powers of God. And the other thing he said was, dust to dust. And then afterwards, he grabbed the crucifix and said was, laid the spirit to rest. And by the time the crucifix hit Freddy's forehead, he tried to struggle through it, but then was destroyed and defeated. But Nancy was taken out, and the only final girl still standing was Kristen. But then, at the ending of the film, we get a glimpse of the cemetery of Nancy being laid to rest after being taken out by Freddy. That's where Dr. Gordon sees the same nun. As he followed her, it was revealed that the nun was actually Freddy Krueger's mother, Amanda Krueger. And then, at the ending of the film, Dr. Gordon had a good night's sleep, and we see a dream charm on the table, right next to the crafted house. But however, as everyone knows, Freddy popped up one last time as the house lit up. And man, I gotta admit, after watching this film, it really sparked a lot of great memories. And yet, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors really has sparked a lot of great history. And Freddy Krueger sure knows how to show everyone a good time when it comes to great movie quotes and everything else he's done. Anyways, I give this film a solid 10 out of 10. Man, I gotta admit, Dream Warriors was actually really cool. But anyways, before we wrap up this film, since it's Halloween and everyone's having a good time, my advice to everyone out there that's trick-or-treating for Halloween candy, make sure you look both ways before crossing the street, and make sure you have someone with you to make sure you're safe at all times. And make sure you knock on the door and say trick or treat. and have a good time, everyone. Anyways, that's about wraps it up here for this edition of a Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. We want to thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on post notifications so you guys do not miss another more amazing content like this. But anyways, only thing I could say is thank you all so much for watching. And from all of us here at 412 Films Productions, and on behalf of the Withered Ender Dragon 2, my dragon brother for life Ethan, and everyone else, only thing we could say is Happy Halloween, everyone!